And welcome to Grandad's Reviews. In this video we're going to have a look at something that's popped up on Facebook, on a Fuji Facebook group I belong to, and that's about the DR ranges in the Fuji cameras. Now I've looked at this before and I've had a look at it again. The posters were on about a video that PowerTech has put up regarding the DR and how it works, and I thought I'd reinvestigate because I might have been wrong in the first place. I believed that the DR range was being facilitated, let's say, by using a curve in the actual highlight and shadow area inside the camera, and it was just doing like an F-log curve. I've re-looked at it again, and actually I think I've found a better explanation. And I still don't believe it's anything that's being manipulated on the chip with different pixels being reduced in ISO or anything. So let's have a look at my test and see what conclusion I've come to. Right, I have these three images. This one here was taken with the dynamic range set to 100. This one was at DR 400. And this one is how I believe the Fuji camera is actually manipulating the image to get this DR 400 dynamic range to work. So if we zoom in and just do a quick test here, we'll go there, we'll go there, and we'll go there. As we can see, we've got no detail in this hat or in the lamp. The light did change a little bit. So on this one here that's on DR 100, if we turn the highlights down and the exposure, we can't get any detail back. This is the DR 400 one. I'll bring the highlights down and the exposure down. Yep, we've got it. This one here, take the highlights down, bring the exposure down, and just forgiving that I misfocused on this one, they're the same. Excellent. Let's put these back where they should be. Let's go for the window. I go just there, the same, and about the same. So on this one here, reduce the highlights, reduce the exposure, and that's about the best we're going to get. This one, reduce the highlights, reduce the exposure, about it. This one, reduce the highlights, reduce the exposure, and I would say that those two are basically identical. And obviously this one is nowhere near. Let's zoom out. So they look the same, whereas that is definitely got less dynamic range as such. So if we put this back to normal, yep, they look about the same. And let's see what I think is actually happening. In the DR 400, it's setting your ISO at 640 as its base. It's then metering the scene. And what the camera's doing is looking at that highlight, and then it's working out what ISO it needs to shoot to get that highlight correct. It then takes the photo at that ISO, but keeps the 640 ISO in the metadata. This is what your editing software sees. So this one here, I exposed for the window in the editing software. So in reality, this was actually taken, that's about right, at that ISO. So the camera actually took the photo at that and then wrote 640 in the raw data, which your editing software reads as a 0 exposure. So that brings it to that, but you've got the data there to pull it back. So in my thing, I took it at ISO 160. We can then bring back all that to match it. And that's what I believe the camera is actually doing internally. It's not doing anything special with the sensor, it's just looking at the metering, picking the ISO for the highlights, using that ISO to take the photo, and then writing the original ISO that you've picked, which is 640 or higher, in the metadata. That gives the editing software its 0 point starting on exposure, and this is what we get. So it's using the fact that the Fuji sensor is an invariant or ISO less sensor. So you can take the image at 160 and pull the exposure up to get whatever ISO you need. So that's what it's doing. So it's sent at 640, metering for the highlights, taking it at ISO 160, but writing 640 in the metadata, which gives your editing software its 0 start. So that was my test. And as you can see, what I believe the camera's doing is when you set DR 400 or any of the DR ranges above 100, it sets your ISO to a higher limit. So DR400, it sets it to 640, and you can use any ISO above that. And then when it meters a scene, it's metering the highlights, looking at what the highlights are, then deciding, well, really, to get those highlights fully recoverable, I need to shoot at a lower ISO, and it'll pick a lower ISO. In my case, I picked 160. So in theory, what's happened in the image I showed you is it's looked at the scene, picked 160 as its ISO, taken the image at that, but wrote 640 in the metadata. When that image is taken into your editing software, the editing software reads that metadata, it says 640, so that's its 0 point. Basically, it's overexposed the 160 ISO image that you would have brought in, like I showed. Then you've still got all that data in the highlights, and then you can bring them back. That's what I think anyway, right or wrong, but it seems to work as I've shown you. So if you don't want to use the DR ranges, you want to stick at DR100, just underexpose or expose to the highlights, and then bring that back in post with the exposure slider, or use the DR ranges. It does it all in camera for you, so it's quick and easy. So that's my look at it. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, that helps the channel. If you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. Till next time, see you later.